Hi, I'm Patrick Cobb with AARP South Carolina. We're pleased to be a sponsor of the Charleston Post and Courier's Pints and Politics series. AARP is a nonprofit organization, so we don't endorse candidates. For more information, go to aarp.org/SC.
Dynamic, that fighting between some of the wholesalers and the smaller breweries. And as you say, you don't see that as much at the federal level, but is there, unrelated to the pandemic, unrelated to stimulus, are there actual issues that you could be pushing for in the future on when it comes to breweries?
Yeah, I mean, there's like I said, I think the Small Craft Modernization Act, which deals with the excise tax, but a lot in a state like South Carolina, the 3-tier system is a lot that's dealt with on a state level. But a lot of the issues that we're dealing with would deal with breweries or other small businesses. Have to do with PPP loans and basically relief from COVID. But we know the owner here knows, other owners know that whatever like federal issues they have to deal with, or whatever hurdles that may come up, they can always contact our office. And it goes to anyone, any small business owner, any federal agency you run into or issue you run into, just call our office, because we can oftentimes help you navigate those. Whereas with some of the local issues, state issues, we're happy to help in the ways we can. But we're finding we're most effective when dealing with the things on the federal level, at least in my role.
I want to ask you about some news of the day. I don't know if you even seen this. You may have heard from her office. Speaker Pelosi today in her weekly news conference said that the Democrats are going to be talking tomorrow about the 25th Amendment. She was kind of vague about why, but so the 25th Amendment is what describes the process of presidential succession. She seems to be bringing this up in light of the president obviously contracting the coronavirus, and she continues to raise questions about how forthcoming he has been about his health condition, and whether the American people deserve to know more details about how healthy their president is, and whether or not there is a serious issue to be concerned about there. First of all, do you think that there should be some kind of discussion about the 25th Amendment at this point? And then more broadly, I mean, do you think over the last week or so, as we've seen the president go in hospital for several days and then come back out, go to the White House, go to the Oval Office against the advice of some of his own aides, do you think he has handled his own health appropriately?
No, I don't think he's handled it appropriately in light of everything we know now. I mean, we're in October 2020, and as it relates to I've been following what's going on with what the speaker said about the 25th Amendment. But look, we're what 20 how many days you say, Scholar? 28 days?
Even less,
27, 26 days away from an election. The voters are going to decide here come November 3rd. And so that's that. And, as it relates to how this president has dealt with, his own, obviously, I'm glad he's out of the hospital. I'm glad him and the first lady are on their path to full recovery. I've gone through it before. My symptoms were very mild. And it's, I remember when I got it, quarantining 14 days, being inside my house, and, you're not only doing that for yourself, you're doing it for other people, not exposing other people. And there's science behind that. And I think the president and everyone else needs to respect the science behind it, of not exposing other people. And look, of course, no one wants to stay in one room for 14 days, but we have to sacrifice a little bit of individual responsibility to care for our neighbors, our friends, our loved ones, some of which may be more vulnerable to this virus than others. So, yeah, whenever I saw the pictures and videos of him getting back to the White House, then removing his mask and then going into the White House, where people are working, it's highly concerning. And I think it should be. I think it should strike a nerve with people on what not to do and how not to behave when contracting this virus. And so, and again, that goes for everyone as far as how to, especially with elected officials. You expect people to kind of lead by example, and I know that we talked about this during the last debate. My opponent, State Representative Mace, had a super spreader event on the night of her primary with hundreds of people there, and no mask and no social distancing. This is at the height of the pandemic, and it's times like this that you do expect people to, especially your elected officials and elected leaders, to exhibit sound judgment and leadership through these times. And I feel like there's a lot of people who have fallen short in that regard.
The discussion around 25th Amendment does just remind us, of course, there has already been an effort to remove this president from office with impeachment. And this was obviously a completely different scenario, but we did just want to go briefly back to that and ask, do you stand by your votes to impeach him? And could you just, remind folks what you saw in his actions that you think deserved that pretty, significant retribution?
Well, of course, and I was one of the last people to make up my mind on this issue, and I came to that conclusion after reviewing all the testimony, all the documents, and when Congress appropriates money, and then the president, withholds that, threatens to withhold it, to curry a political favor, and under the facts and under the circumstances, I did believe, and I still believe it warranted the actions that came. But look, at the end of the day, I wasn't sent up there to D.C. to be a rubber stamp for the president. I wasn't sent up there to impeach him. I also wasn't sent up there to protect him either. And that same week we went through impeachment, we also worked together to pass the most significant trade deal in decades, the USMCA, that very same week. The president signed at least 2 of my bills into law. And so I think that, when I talk to folks, it's like, listen, I'm not going up there to work for a president. I'm not going up there to work for a party. But when we agree on things, we're going to work together. When we disagree on issues that I feel impacts the low country or runs counter to our values, then I'm going to hold them accountable. And it's something, we've talked about since day one, and I feel like something we've held true to.
Well, based on that answer, do you believe then that for the past 7 months since the impeachment that the president has been serving guilty of crimes against the United States?
What particular crimes? What do you mean?
Well, the impeachment path and everything that he did with going around Congress and such.
Well, I mean, we obviously went through that process. The Senate had their trial, and that's where it ended. And so, we're not looking to relitigate those issues. I stand by, the votes that I've taken, and in the House, you do your job, and the Senate does their job, hopefully, and that's just the way Congress works. So, again, this is something that votes that we take, and we come to these decisions not lightly either. But then you continue working with people, and I think in my experience, before, this is obviously the first office I've held, but and I talk to people a lot about practicing law and working as an attorney, about through cases, and you work with different attorneys, and you don't kind of look back as to old cases or old results. You continue working with other. And if you're doing as an attorney for the betterment of your client. If you're in an elected office, keep working with whoever's in power and whoever's in that position for your constituents. I can't, look back as to things I may have, thought they did wrong, or times I've criticized them. I've been vocal when I disagree with them, but I've also applauded him when I feel like his actions have, benefited the low country. He signed, the Great American Outdoors Act, which is one of the biggest pieces of environmental legislation in probably half a century. And that was our bill in the House. He signed that in the law, and something we commended him for. He signed one of my veterans bills in the law. And so, look, you work with whoever's in office to get results for your constituents, and that's where my focus has been.
The big news in the district in the last week, what came as a shock to everybody, was that the Marine Corps Commandant, General Berger, was considering closing San Diego and Parris Island and starting from scratch with a new base, so that the Marines could be integrated there, co-ed. Have you reached out to him yet? Had a Zoom meeting, phone call, letters, any sort of sit down asking him to explain his logic, and for you to explain face-to-face why or why not that's a bad idea for the district?
Yeah, I spoke with General Berger directly this week, and there are no plans to close Parris Island. And I'm pretty disappointed in how my opponent has tried to use this as a political football. I was proud of the military budget that we passed, and almost the entire South Carolina delegation. I voted along with Senator Graham, Senator Scott, basically every member of South Carolina's delegation except for Congressman Tom Rice. And that military budget provided our men and women in uniform the largest pay raise in a decade. It increased funding for our military bases. And so it had a lot of great things in it. And the fact that my opponent, Representative Mace, wants to distort that view for her own political gain is just incredibly disappointing. And the state newspaper and other independent fact checkers have called her claim false, and have called her out for just leaving out information. And so, look, when I spoke to General Berger, he's got some concerns about climate change. I know that's something my opponent doesn't recognize or doesn't accept the science behind. I mean, I think y'all talked about that during her Pints and Politics. But the fact is, my opponent's running ads and talking about gender integration as if that's the big threat to Parris Island, and it's not. I mean, women aren't the threat to our Marine Corps. There are some challenges you're going to be dealing with climate change and rising sea levels, but this is all going to take just additional resources for Parris Island. When I talked to General Berger, as we look to do gender integration down there, we're going to have to build some more barracks. That can be done fairly easily. It's also going to need some more dollars in infrastructure to deal with rising sea level and climate change. But this is all require infrastructure dollars, like everything else. And I'm going to keep fighting like hell to make sure we keep bringing back the money for Parris Island. I helped secure over $37 million for some facilities down there just this year alone. So, there's some challenges, obviously, but it's nothing that can't be overcome with the injection of additional resources. And that's what I'm committed to doing. And I got to say, I stand committed alongside, Senator Scott, Senator Graham, Joe Wilson, Jeff Duncan, Ralph Norman, William Timmons, everyone else in South Carolina's delegation who's committed to Parris Island.
Now I'd like to move on to our AARP question of the day. They're our sponsor, so I'd like to point this out again. Americans pay the highest prescription drug prices in the world. If reelected, how will you cut those prices for all Americans?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that it's obviously the kitchen table issue. When you go to CVS or Walgreens, you're getting hit, and you feel this. And the fact is, we're paying more on prescription drugs than about any other country in the world. And we've actually passed about a dozen bipartisan bills in the House that address the high cost of prescription drugs. We've passed legislation, for instance, that also lets Medicare negotiate the price of prescription drugs. All these have shown and would reduce the overall cost of prescription drugs. And that's the idea, is to make those costs lower. It's obviously a strong contrast between where my opponent is. She supports the MACE tax plan, increases taxes on prescription drugs 23%. So if you add that to the 7% state sales tax, under her plan, you'll be paying 30% tax on these prescription drugs. And I think we can work together, Democrats and Republicans, to address this issue and do it in a bipartisan fashion that helps drive down the cost. So,
can I ask you about the tax thing? Because there's been a lot of talk about this in the debate, and I don't know why there hasn't been sort of a more thorough exploration of exactly what this idea is. But so it's called the fair tax, right? It's this idea. I mean, that's what it's called. This came from Ron Paul, I think, was one of the originators of it. It's about the sales, basically about reducing all other forms of tax and putting everything on sales taxes. 23%, I think, is the number that he and she have proposed. And so, yes, that may lead to some increases on people who are buying things, but it also means you'll be getting taxed less on your income. So, for some folks, that could be a net tax cut. It may be a net tax increase for others. I mean, why do you think that idea is a bad idea?
I think it's terrible. I mean, you can say all you want about reducing some taxes or increasing other taxes, but one thing is for certain is that the 23% tax would go into effect. And, sometimes people say, well, we're gonna we're going to repeal and replace the healthcare system, when in fact all they want to do is repeal the ACA, and they don't have a replacement plan. So, they might be able to say like we're going to, reduce certain taxes here, but increase taxes. The only thing I've heard affirmatively is the increase of 23%. And I just think that for everyday Americans going and paying, you go to Publix and you spend $100, and then you got to pay another $30 on top of that for a sales tax, or you go to Walgreens, do the same. I think, I don't think it's the tax structure that everyday Americans are looking for, to shell out another 30% their daily trips to Walgreens or Publix or Harris Teeter. And we do need some reform to our tax system, but not at the expense and the cost of the middle class and the people who go to grocery shopping or to Walgreens every single day.
So you mentioned the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, and do want to talk about healthcare a little bit. I think you, like a lot of Democrats, have said that you want to build upon, to expand upon, to fix some of the problems with the Affordable Care Act, rather than repealing it and replacing it, and rather than going further and doing some kind of Medicare for all, single payer, government-funded system. Could you get a little specific? What do you see as the problems with the Affordable Care Act right now? What does building upon it mean?
Yeah, of course. Well, and let's take a step back and realize that there is a plan in place right now. The ACA was a plan, and was it perfect? No, but we can make things a little bit better. And compared to my opponent who just wants to throw everything out and have no replacement, we do have a plan in place right now. And I think South Carolina should have expanded Medicaid here in our state, as other states have done. It's unfortunate that was done for political reasons, but we look at improving the ACA. A couple things. We need more competition in the marketplace, first of all. And I mentioned earlier, we talked about the AARP question, allowing Medicare to negotiate the price of prescription drugs. We've passed, again, a dozen bills in the House, bipartisan bills, that kind of patch up some of these loopholes that I feel like Big Pharma takes advantage of, like the.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. A lot of people answer that they could allow health to negotiate prices. Why isn't that done now? Is it Big Pharma that's stopping that from happening?
I would take a look at who's controlling the politicians. We don't take any money from PACs. I'm not beholden to anybody, but up in Washington D.C., those checks run rampant, and you got politicians who I literally send back tens of thousands of dollars in PAC checks every single month, and I think you probably have to look at who's writing the checks and look at who's beholden to them. But something like this, the amount of people who would agree with Medicare negotiating the price of prescription drugs. Here's the largest buyer of prescription drugs in the entire country. They should have that flexibility and that ability. I would imagine it's the Big Pharma who has heartburn over it and who lobbies like hell against it. But we're talking about, there's other things too. There's the pay for delay. There's tactics that pharmaceutical companies do to essentially hold on to those patents a little bit longer and squeeze more money out of their drug before a generic is allowed to enter the market. And because of our laws, we're essentially subsidizing the lower cost of prescription drugs in other countries. We talk about improving the ACA, being able to buy drugs from Canada. There's a whole host of ways in which you could further, I feel like, continue to drive down the cost of prescription drugs and other costs.
One of the big issues that was in this race, more so maybe a few months ago, before President Trump issued his order banning offshore exploration, kind of took the wind out of the sails in a couple different ways in that, but not the advertising. That's still gone on. You speak often about getting the bill passed, banning it off South Carolina and passing the House. Your opponent, Nancy Mace, points out that no other Republicans signed on to it from South Carolina. So she's saying, it's not really that big an accomplishment. Who's right here?
I am. Yeah, and she's misleading the voters again. And it's unfortunate, that we can't just have a conversation with the bare facts. Just like she's the recent issue with Paris Island. She's misleading voters again, lying to them about that. The mayor of Beaufort called for her ad to be taken down on Paris Island. She's just on her own on that issue, where the rest of the South Carolina delegation is unified, Democrats and Republicans. She's also wrong about the offshore drilling bill. It was bipartisan. She likes to say that that no other member of South Carolina's delegation voted for it. And I find that disrespectful on a whole number of ways, because Majority Whip Jim Clyburn did support the bill. And the only reason he didn't vote for it is because he was caring for his sick wife. And the fact that she would spin that as politics is, I think, extremely distasteful. Again, it did have broad bipartisan support. I worked with a lot of Republicans down in Florida, a lot of coastal areas. And the reason why the Republicans in South Carolina did not support it is because they're for offshore drilling. So of course they want to support a bill that where they're against the actual merits of it.
Tom Rice for offshore drilling.
He voted against the bill.
Sure, but I think he said basically what she has said, right? Which is basically that it should be left to the states to decide, and that the states can oppose offshore drilling.
But Jamie, come on,
Yeah.
I know, but think about this though. Think about how ridiculous of an argument that is. Leave it to the states to decide. I mean, anybody who thinks about that argument for more than 15 seconds realizes just how ridiculous that is. Everyone knows if Georgia's for offshore drilling and South Carolina's against it, and there's a spill off of Georgia, where's it coming? It's coming to Hilton Head. It's coming to Folly Beach. It's washing up on the shore. Oil doesn't respect state boundaries. And I talk about this. This is how silly it sounds. Imagine a restaurant owner said, I'm against smoking in restaurants, okay? But I think we should let each table decide whether or not to smoke inside a restaurant. And we'll do it table by table. I mean, you realize how ridiculous that sounds? That's the same rationale that Representative Mace uses. And again, we need a complete ban along the eastern seaboard. And we got that ban through in bipartisan fashion in the House. I'm proud of the work that we did. I'm proud that we're able to bring Democrats and Republicans together. Even Matt Gaetz, one of the most conservative Republicans in Congress, supported the bill. So, and I have yet to hear what it is about the bill that my opponent disagrees with. I mean, I guess she just wants it to be state by state, but these are federal waters.
Yeah. Let me ask you one last thing about it, which is, so you last week or recently voted against the Democratic coronavirus relief bill because you said it was a messaging exercise, that it was not a real solution. There'd been no real agreement with the Republicans. It wasn't going to pass the Senate. This bill hasn't passed the Senate, right? And this has been her other criticism of it. And I do want to give you a chance to respond to it. Is this idea that it was for show and that it was not going to actually become law because the Senate was never going to pass it.
Our bill was bipartisan. The offshore drilling bill was bipartisan. It had Democrats and Republicans. Again, Matt Gaetz and about a dozen Republicans supported that bill.
Did you really think there was a chance of it becoming law when it passed the House?
Yeah, absolutely. I was optimistic, and you have to ask yourself, why hasn't it passed the Senate yet? And I put it right at the feet of Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, if he wanted that bill to get brought up and have a vote on it, it would have a vote. But Senator Graham is more beholden to the oil interest and PACs and big oil than he is the constituents here in South Carolina. So
you mentioned big oil. So another attack recently from Representative Mace has been that before you were in Congress, when you were an attorney, there were several clients of yours in the oil industry. I think she's brought up Mount Hawley Insurance Company. I don't know if these ring a bell. The Austin Company, Graystar Development. Folks that had pretty significant interests in the oil industry. Were those clients of yours? And if so, is that something voters should be concerned about?
I think that's a pretty far stretch. I bought gasoline for my 4Runner last week too, and I'm not sure if she's going to try to tie that to me supporting big oil or not. Look, these are pretty far stretches. The fact that that somebody who is a client had a vested interest in some company which had an interest. I mean, I don't even know what the connection is that she's trying to make, to be honest. But I think it sounds pretty far-fetched. And what's even more ridiculous than that is that, so the guy who passed a bipartisan bill banning offshore drilling is somehow tied. I don't know what the connection is. I just think this is seems kind of far-fetched, far-reaching, and desperate, to be honest. And it's, I find it rich too that someone who says, I cash every check, those are her words, I cash every check, and someone who actually tried to start her own super PAC, is now trying to say I'm beholden to, I don't know. I guess I just don't get what the nexus is, or what she's implying. She's implying that the guy who passed the bill banning offshore drilling is beholden to oil. It seems a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think she's implying that. She's saying that.
Yeah. Well, I think if she's saying that, I think that look, the voters are smarter than that, and our constituents are smarter than that, and I think it's a pretty far reach, even for her.
The offshore drilling ban bill was the first bit of legislation you got passed when you were up there in your first term. If you had the power to pass 3 bills in your next term, what would those 3 primary bills be?
Well, getting that ban signed into law, obviously, a robust stimulus package that completely addressed the needs of small businesses, and testing, and small, municipalities, states and counties. Obviously, getting through this pandemic is first and foremost. So getting through that, and then getting to the other side, I think we need an infrastructure bill. I was proud that we were able to get the money required to dredge Charleston Harbor out to its required depth, which is going to be the deepest port along the eastern seaboard. But we also, we've also got more work to do on the healthcare as well. Getting our healthcare cost under control, and continuing to drive down the cost of prescription drugs. Those are some of the, I guess, the kitchen table issues that I think that are most impactful, impact every single American, day in, day out. So I think it's those kitchen table issues that we kind of launched our first campaign on, and things we've tried to hold true to as well.
You were also a supporter of the Charleston loophole legislation. Right. Is that going to go anywhere, or will it take the Senate become Republican for that to move? You're not going to get any allies. Yeah, I'm sorry, Democrat.
I was hoping Senator Scott would pick that up, and run with that. Look, this isn't a this is a bill that respects the Second Amendment and is common sense gun safe. And again, my opponent and I are going to disagree on this one as well. But the Charleston loophole does need to be closed. And what it's doing is giving the agencies, law enforcement agencies, the time that they need to run a proper background check, period. And it got bipartisan support as well. And I was actually talking to somebody today about this. This is something that I worked with Majority Whip Clyburn on, and we were able to bring over a lot of Republican support. I remember the day that we passed that bill, just how emotional it was. Senator Pinckney's widow was up in the gallery with her 2 beautiful daughters, and it was early on in my term, and we brought the bill up, and I was running around the floor talking to colleagues, talking to Republicans, trying to bring more Republicans over. I remember seeing my colleague Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican, and explaining to him the impact this had on our community and the importance it had for me personally in the community. And after explaining it to him, we brought Brian over to vote for it and to support it, another Republican. And it's a very, very emotional day for me personally. I know it was for Majority Whip Clyburn. And I was hopeful that, because it is so common sense, that Senator Scott would pick this up and run with it. And I'm disappointed they hadn't. But maybe next term, someone else can carry the mantle and bring that across the finish line. But it's one of these things that's common sense, does not infringe on anyone's Second Amendment right, but it just injects some pragmatism to gun safety.
There was some talk a few weeks ago about taking up legislation to decriminalize marijuana in the House by removing it from the Controlled Substances Act. That was punted. It seems like it's going to happen after the election now. States would be free to pass their own laws on marijuana. Other aspects of the bill were establishing a fund for people impacted by drugs and the drug war, a 5% tax on legal sales, and a process to expunge certain convictions for nonviolent offenses on that. If that does come up next year, do you support and plan to vote for that bill?
Yeah, overall, generally, I support the idea of decriminalizing and letting states decide. I have to look at this as far as what the final details of it whenever it comes out. But generally, yeah, overall, I support it.
This is one of our reader questions. Some scientists are suggesting that nuclear power is still the most effective energy product out there. It can be made safe, but with the collapse of what happened up in Fairfield County, we're not going to see that anytime soon here. What sort of green power initiatives do you support in terms of something that could be really effective in South Carolina?
I think solar is the future, to be honest. And we talked a lot about Parris Island and how Parris Island has harnessed solar energy. They actually produce enough solar power on Parris Island to power the entire military installation. In fact, even more so, they actually sell energy back. And so that's how effective it is. And I think as we're looking at the future and we're looking at panels becoming more efficient, and the potential that South Carolina has in general with the amount of sunlight, and I think that's going to be, I've got solar panels on my house. I know a lot of people who are investing into their own homes, but this is going to be something and we got a lot of great companies, especially here in the Low Country, that are manufacturing, installing, distributing. This is it has a very bright future, pardon the pun.
Well, I'll follow up on that too. We asked this to Jamie Harrison yesterday too, is the federal flood program is not effective enough to cover the losses. What do you envision in shoring that up? Have you investigated this at all? And are people who live on the coast, does the burden need to go on them as an expense of them living on the coast?
Well, this isn't, a lot of people have mistaken that this is just a beachfront owners problem. Well, it's not. This is a people who live in low-lying areas problem. So, it may be the the coastal elite in some parts, but also may be more middle class, working class people in other parts. So I don't think this is just an issue that impacts the people beachfront on Kiowa. This is a lot more broad than that. And in the past we've just kind of done patchwork legislation, and we've been pressing for it. I know the Realtors Association, this is a big issue for them, and instead of kicking the can down the road of getting something more permanent done, I think we were on the verge of doing something more permanent, but before this pandemic began, and then that upended so many other priorities. But
can you explain what that solution is, or what was being looked at?
Well, there's a couple of different pieces of legislation, and there's a couple of different options on how to defray the cost or spread the cost around. But there's also talks about similar to infrastructure banks, ways in which to raise the capital and allocate it. But I know there's just a couple of different ways in order to attack it. But I hope that we can get back to looking at that once we get through the other side of this pandemic. But it's an issue that's not going away. It's especially as we look at the rising sea levels, the kind of persistence of king tides. This is something we need to address sooner rather than later, for sure. But it's going to require, not only shoring up the flood insurance program, but also investing in our infrastructure, and that's going to require dollars.
There are a few other big races going on right now, higher up the ticket than yours are when people are going in to vote here in the district. And we wanted to ask you about those real quick. At the presidential level, without mentioning Donald Trump, why do you think Joe Biden is the best choice for the next 4 years?
Well, so I think Joe Biden's a good man. I think he's got a big heart, and I think he has a he's proven that time and time again. I've met him a handful of times, and there's some people that you meet, you can just tell that they love people and they love helping people. And I think Vice President Biden is one of those. And he's got a look at during these times. I think we need people who have a proven track record of working with others, of bipartisanship. And I think Vice President Biden has that. Was it Senator Graham said, if you can't find something to like about Joe Biden, somebody or some kind of quote that that everyone recognizes that he's a good man and he's in it for the right reasons. And again, he's got a proven track record of leadership and of bipartisanship and of getting things done. And I think during this time and age, we need somebody who can bring people together and instead of dividing us.
And then you mentioned Senator Graham, what he said about Joe Biden. And frankly, Senator Graham has actually brought you up a good bit recently, sometimes attacking you. He came down and campaigned for Nancy Mace, but then actually recently on the debate stage, and I do actually get into this issue in a few minutes, he raised you as an example of moderation when he noted that you had opposed the $600 a week enhanced unemployment benefits. What has your experience been like working with Lindsey Graham for the last 2 years? And why do you think that the South Carolinians should consider voting for Jamie Harrison instead this time?
I think Jamie Harrison will pick up my offshore drilling bill and run with it first and foremost. Obviously, Senator Graham has said a lot of different things about me, and all that rolls off my back, the good, the bad, whatever. But look, when it comes to advocating for effective change. I think we need people who will have, South Carolinians' best interest and just do what they say they're going to do. And I've been disappointed by what we've seen now with the Supreme Court nomination process. And I think people just want leaders who are just consistent, not say one thing during one election cycle and turn around and do something the other. And so, I appreciate, Senator Graham commending me on being a moderate member. I prefer to see Jamie Harrison, Senator Harrison, up there.
Have there been any issues, any bills that you have worked closely with Senator Graham on successfully at all with him in his office?
Look, our offices share a wall, the one over here in Mount Pleasant, and so it's important that and their office staff has been great and has worked really well with ours. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize, that so much of our work is, it's not just the votes we take on in DC, it's the constituent work. It's helping people out with passports or their Social Security, their, IRS outstanding balance. And so, that's I'm very proud of our office in that regard. And that's why we kept over some of Mark Sanford's staff, Democrats and Republicans in our office that can do the job. And I know our office has worked closely with Senator Graham's on constituent work and casework and things like that. Obviously, there's a lot of things that, as it relates to local issues, whether it be issues of Boeing or Clemson University or Carolina, that I think the whole delegation is united on. Parris Island is just a prime example, and the fact that that all of us were united. Exception of Tom Rice, who voted against it, but all of us are united in protecting Parris Island, securing it. And so all of us are right there. And then you have my opponent who's off on her own. But there's a lot of things I feel that people are united on, Democrats and Republicans. The problem is it doesn't really oftentimes make news. It's not as I guess shiny as the division and the conflict.
Well, in that vein, can you point to any legislation that you and members of the delegation have sat down and written together? Is there anything that you can say, I work with so-and-so on this and on this, that really stands out?
Yeah, I remember having breakfast meeting with the Majority Whip, Jim Clyburn, hosted, and it's centered around rural broadband, and there's a lot of commonality there with rural broadband. And even though my district, first district, is more coastal, but the rural parts have a little bit more of an issue with that. Although there are parts in our district that struggle with it as well. And so there have been some broadband initiatives that we've been working on, local issues too. Whether it be again, like university letters in support of Clemson or Carolina, or say, Ralph Norman needs to get some funds for a highway extension. We'll work with him on the issue, and he'll work with us. I mean, there's just a lot of different kind of local issues, I guess, and I'll approach William Timmons. Hey, I'm doing this for a veteran in our district. Will you sign on this letter? Again, these things may not always make the news, but I've got a good working relationship, I feel, with the entire delegation. We may diverge on viewpoints on some of the hot button issues, but I think there's this misconception that it's always just fighting and fighting and fighting. But the fact is, just because we can't agree on everything doesn't mean we can't work together on anything. And that's been kind of the approach I've taken.
Well, the economy has been battered during this COVID, but this issue has been hanging around for a couple of years now. Should the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour be increased? And if you agree, what would be the steps and the goal, and how soon would you like to see it go to a set level?
The first answer is yes, absolutely. It should be increased. And again, taking consideration, this is something that can be done on the state level as well. 725 is embarrassing, and it's just it's long past due. It's a balancing test. When they passed the bill in the House to more than double the minimum wage, I voted against it, and I didn't really make a lot of friends in my own party by voting against a bill like that. But this is a decision I came to by, number one, talking to our local businesses, talking to our constituents as to what impacts it would have on their business. And what they told me was a few things. I remember talking to John Keener at Charleston. I remember talking to lots of small business owners, and they would say it would either result in cut hours or laid off employees or both. And you take that in consideration, but you also take the CBO score, Congressional Budget Office, and this report tells you how many jobs this is a nonpartisan office, tells you how many jobs you may lose in the country, and then also what it would cost the economy. And what we found is, you can increase the minimum wage with very little impact, but then once you get past a certain point, 12, 13 bucks an hour, then the impacts become more drastic. I think the minimum wage should increase. I think it should go into double digits. But I thought that 15 was too high, too much, and too soon. But look, if restaurant owners, small businesses in Charleston, no, you can't pay anybody $725 or $7.25 an hour. You can't do it. You can't get good, reliable help. The dishwashers and downtown restaurants, you're going to pay 10, 11 bucks an hour at least to keep people in there. And so I think it's past time the minimum wage be raised, but it can also be done at the state level too, though, not just the federal.
So you mentioned you voted against that, and that was something that went against your party. Another way, and I brought it up a few minutes ago, is this enhanced unemployment benefit. This is another issue in which you and Senator Graham did see eye to eye a little bit, and that both of you said that folks should not be making more in unemployment than they did at work, which is possible for lower income earners to be doing if you add the state and the federal income. There have been some economic studies that have somewhat disproved the argument that I think both of you have made for this, which is that folks won't come back to work if they can make more in unemployment. There are some economists who say, actually, we're not really seeing that, and also may say, if people lost their health insurance because they're not employed right now, if they had employer provided health insurance, they might need some extra money, more than they were making at the workplace. Why did you think that the $600 was too much?
Well, again, it was supporting the notion that people could make the same but not more in unemployment, and that was it. I talked to a lot of small business owners, a lot of people who own restaurants, and what I heard is that when they wanted to open back up, they're calling their employees and they're getting pushback on it, saying that, hey, I can't get people back to work because they're making more on unemployment than they are coming in person. Now, I don't think that's the case for all the people, of course not, but there are certain scenarios where that I think that probably was the case, but not to say that that was the overall trend, but it seems to be pretty pragmatic and common sense that if you went on unemployment, you shouldn't be able to make more money by not working than you were when you were working. And if that upset some people in my own party, then that's the cost of it. But again, this is decision that I reached based on keeping my finger on the pulse on small businesses and constituents here in the Low Country and hearing what they had to say. So I would, I defer them as opposed to maybe a economist up in New York or California. I just talked to the people in our district, and the people have employees that they're trying to get back to work.
And this is another reader question. How will you address the lack of high quality, affordable childcare in South Carolina? I guess that would be a national issue. How do you address it that way?
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue not just on providing childcare. It's about leveling the playing field for working parents. I know a lot of mothers and fathers who feel like they can't get back into the workforce, or at least get back to the place where they once were. Because of childcare, and this is something we battle with as well with my 2.5-year-old. Finding childcare, finding affordable childcare. I think expanding the tax credit, the child tax credit is one way. Just make it more affordable and making more of that to be written off for tax purposes. You're obviously going to have some type of tax incentive and something to make it more affordable. Because I talk to a lot of people who try to weigh the balance between if I go back to work and then I also pay this much for childcare, it may be a wash, or I may be making a little bit more. It may not be worth it. We need to make that decision a little bit easier for parents. So where it's not a financial decision, it's just a decision of getting back into the workforce. And I think, as we look at different plans, the CBO can score these different plans, but there's a inherent value of getting people back into the workforce, and just the overall net positive of making that happen.
And finally, before we move on to the lightning round here at the end, I do want to ask you about something.
I wasn't aware of the lightning round, Jamie.
Another thing that comes up in a lot of ads and has come up during your 2018 race and came again now has been Speaker Pelosi. And I did want to ask you 2 questions about this really quick. So as you—
Is this part of the lightning round too?
Nah, it's close, but the first one might be an easy question. As you said in 2018, you were going to vote against her. You did. You voted for Sherry Bustos. First off, will you vote against her? Will you vote for someone else again if you are reelected?
Well, I said I want support for Speaker of the House in 2018. Nothing has changed since then.
Have you thought about who you might vote for this time?
I don't know who's running. Do you know something I don't?
Bustos wasn't running either.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll see. I guess in January if you're reelected.
When, Jamie?
But I do want to ask you. You probably have gotten to know her at least a little bit better over the last 2 years than you did when you were first running, when you'd never been in political office before. Has anything surprised you about her, working with her? Is there anything, experiences with her that might surprise the constituents, people who have not seen Nancy Pelosi up close, only see her in the headlines or only see her on TV?
Well, look, I think that, again, I was in everyone else's position about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, with my only insight to Washington, D.C. being national news and being what I see on TV. I would say overall, from a 30,000-foot level, that people generally get along a lot better than you would see on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. Things can operate pretty respectfully. And, I see, Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and Nancy Pelosi having civil discussions. I see, a lot of people, having cordial discussions without the kind of the, in your face mentality that you would think from watching TV. And I've tried to adapt the same method, and trying to reach out to as many of my colleagues across the aisle as possible, whether it be through the House gym, exercising there, or the prayer breakfast, or the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is half Dems, half Republicans. But again, like I'm proud of the work that I've gotten done in the first term. The fact that I was able to, get 2 of my bills signed into law, which is I think more than any other member of South Carolina's delegation besides Clyburn and Graham, who've both been up there for decades. So, looking back at the last 2 years, I'm proud of the work that I've gotten done, and I'm not looking to, I'm not trying to disparage my colleagues, Republican or Democrat, because at the end of the day, we got to continue working together, whether or not you agree with what they say or do, or you disagree with some things. And that's the attitude I've taken. I think it works too, Jamie. Like, like I said, my track record of getting bills passed and getting actually my bills signed into law, I think there's some merit to that. That if you treat people with respect and kindness, then you can build relationships, across the aisle, and what you can effectuate change.
Well, and just finally on that, so one of the reasons why people in the majority party generally don't vote against the person who's running for speaker is because if they do, there's some fear that there's going to be retribution. They're not going to be able to get any bills passed. They're not going to be able to work with the speaker at all. Has that been your experience?
I mean, I think you take a look at the track record that I've gotten here. I got my bill, the banning offshore drilling, the bipartisan bill, got that passed. The Great American Outdoors Act was my bill, got that through. The VA Telehearing Modernization Act was another bill that I got through. We've gotten a lot. I feel like I've gotten a lot done. So, if there was any idea of retribution, I mean.
Okay. All right. Let me step in and take care of a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, I think we had a little sound problem at the beginning. We are in a keg barn, so if there was a problem with that, I think what we want to do is send you a full recording. Will be available afterwards, and we're going to email that to everyone who is a participant and registered. 1 second here. Another housekeeping is that in the next few weeks, we will have our South Carolina podcast. We'll be highlighting the 2 big races in the state, so also stay attuned to that. Please be sure to register for all Pints and Politics events, all our newsletters, Palmetto Politics, Columbia, and the Post and Courier at home. We want to thank the congressman. We want to thank the people at Westbrook. It was a good year for us, and we hope to come back as soon as possible when the election is over. So now we're going to go to the lightning round, and we're going to let Jamie do the first question.
Besides the Bible, what book is on your nightstand that you're reading right now?
Sapiens.
Which one was it?
Sapiens.
This is probably going to lose you some votes. What's your favorite beach in the district?
Sullivan's.
They're screaming on folly right now.
Yeah.
Only because I can take my dog out there unleashed, though. There's 2 beaches I can take him unleashed. Sullivan's and IOP.
You've had 2 debates in this race so far. Nancy Mace has invited you to do 2 more today, and she's made a big deal about that. Why not do 2 more debates?
We've had twice as many debates as we had in the 2018 cycle. I think people have heard the issues where we stand on things. So, I think people were pretty clear on her voting record, or her lack thereof voting record, and the Mace tax plan. And, I'm not sure what more debates would accomplish. But, again, we've already extended ourselves to twice as many debates as we did last time.
A lot of Mark Sanford voters supported you 2 years ago. Have you spoken with him lately, or thanked him, or just consulted him at all about Washington?
Yeah, I mean, Mark was helpful when I was making the transition, and I like Mark, and still stay in touch with him and stay in contact with him as questions arise. He spent a good number of years up there in D.C. And if I have questions about the mechanics of it, I'm not afraid to reach out.
Are you interested in ever running for other political offices in South Carolina?
I feel like this one may have aged me enough. I'm just focused on representing the Low Country right now.
And mustard-based, ketchup-based, or vinegar-based barbecue?
You are going to lose me some votes here, aren't you? Huh? I would say probably today mustard based.
All right. Tyler's going to be upset about that one. Anyway.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.